Hey friends, you're going to love our podcast today. We're establishing a really important principle that courage is not rooted in boldness or bravado or strength, but is actually rooted in love. And we're going to talk about an amazing example of this as the soccer team from Iran was faced, women's soccer team faced with an incredibly difficult decision of actually leaving their homeland for freedom, which they love, or returning to their homeland for fear that they'll never see their parents alive again. And we're talking about the larger picture as well of what's going on in this battle in Iran and the ultimate ideological battle against Islam. Is Islam compatible with our Judeo-Christian Western values? We're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk about how empathetic suicide is leading to the destruction of our nation and how we need to get that corrected really quick. So you're going to love the podcast. We hope you tune in.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Here we are in our bunker trying to survive this lack of climate-controlled studio here. Pastor Andrew's freezing. I'm going to try to do the podcast in 5 minutes today just so that he can get out of here before he catches a head cold or something.
I mean, it's like hot, cold. Yesterday it was like 80 degrees. Today is 20, so sounds about right.
I just came from Mississippi, and I was telling Matthew, I looked on my phone today. I said, I wonder what the weather's going to be like here. And I forgot that I had changed it to my Mississippi address, and it says 69 now. I'm like, honey, it's 69 already, and it's supposed to get up to 80. And then I realized I was in the wrong state. Anyway, you probably couldn't, you can't even tell who's talking to you right now, can you? Because of my camouflage hat.
Not that good a camel. But
did you notice too? I color coordinated the green with my camel.
You look like you're from the South. You're about to go hunting. So we're doing a podcast or we're about to go hunting season?
No, you don't want me hunting. Trust me. Nothing's going to get killed. But I'll shoot up all kinds of... I went on one hunting expedition, just a little history here from my hunting experience. It was with my buddy Mike in high school. I had a 410 shotgun. We went out early in the morning at the crack of dawn, and it was winter. And literally, I saw nothing move. So we ended up shooting field gourds with my shotgun. That was it. So animals are safe. Everybody's safe as long as I am armed. I'm not going to find anything. But hey, first of all, did you guys have an amazing time here this weekend?
Yeah, we did.
I saw I knew Pastor Aaron was up, and I didn't get a chance to hear the message, but I heard a little clip that Matthew posted. It was awesome.
Yeah, he preached on, the gentle topic of judgment. So.
Some people might accuse me of handing him that difficult topic while I'm gone.
You're like, I'm going to be gone this week.
It's like, hey everybody, welcome to Living Stones this morning. Let's talk about the judgment of God. But I think first of all, I want to say praise the Lord for heavy topics that our church is not afraid to talk about, because obviously, apart from the judgment of God and sin, mercy and grace are absolutely meaningless. So it's important to understand a holy God, a righteous God, and the provision that the cross has made so that we don't have to be the recipients of the judgment of God any longer.
Yeah, I thought Aaron did such a great job really expressing the fact that judgment and love, they're not opposing, they're the same thing. You cannot even have love without judgment. I mean, how loving can you be when you just let rampant immorality or perversity or cruelty keep going? Bloodshed keep going. How loving could you be?
Absolutely. So again, and the cross is meaningless apart from sin and judgment.
Love, compassion, all of that's meaningless without judgment. So judgment is a required. I love it. He compared judgment to gravity. That's my favorite part of the sermon when he just talked about. I mean, it's part of God's creation. It's part of the natural order of who God is, and it's not like, oh, God's such a judgmental God. No. That's part of reality, and so anyways, I thought he articulated judgment really well. And, it's Pastor Aaron Brown, so he's able to articulate these heavy points, but he has his own,
That's another reason why I handed it to him. He would do a much better job of providing hope and a smile and a big hug afterwards. He does such a good job.
It really was a hopeful message. Yeah. So. Yeah, great job, Tim.
Well, good. And so I was down. I need to probably explain this cool camo hat because this is not my normal attire.
Where were you this weekend? There you go.
Yeah, okay. I was down at the NRP Mississippi Leadership Conference. And let me just pause by saying, our church is part of a network called the Network of Related Pastors. We call it NRP for short. And I've just been so blessed by especially the relationships. We're a non-denominational independent church, which means we don't have any kind of denominational fellowship, conferences, gatherings. And so I think the problem with non-denominational churches is you can kind of feel a little bit isolated out there and alone. And so I've been so grateful. Our network is not a network that is a network rooted in doctrine like we all have to believe exactly the same thing. On the essential doctrines, obviously we do, but this is really more, as the title says, it's a relational network. So this is the second year these 4 Mississippi churches, who are all part of NRP, have gathered together. We had about 120 leaders that showed up, and the whole goal is just to spend half a day on Saturday to encourage, equip. We had some question and answers, very relational, interactive, but the whole goal being just to pour into pastors and their key leaders. So it was a lot of fun. Of course, I love taking my wife with me and having her be right by my side on these types of things because she really adds a lot of value. And it was just a great time. But Pastor Gene and Regina Amoson, Church Alive, which is a church with a very similar history to Living Stones. Their church is in a little town called McGee, Mississippi, and they are doing an amazing job not only reaching people, but just touching the larger community. And so this cool hat I have on, I'm doing our first podcast promo. You didn't know we had sponsors. We have sponsors. This hat is from my man, John Rankin. John, I'm giving you a shout out. John is one of the members of the church down there, Church Alive. His family's been in that area for many, many years. And he has a body shop that he runs, Rankin. I'm going to get the name right here. Rankin Body Repair. And a great guy. And this is his investment in our podcast. And so if you need your car repaired and you live in Mississippi, I'm telling you, go see John. In fact, if you're in a surrounding 5-state area, go see John. Even if your car doesn't need to be repaired, go see John. He's just a great guy. And if anybody else wants to give us gifts, we will share whatever you're doing, all right? Because we're desperate at this point, all right? No, we aren't desperate, but we are having fun. So John and Church Alive and Gene and Regina, love you guys and love your whole family down there. And thanks for the fun. So I got to, they're in a series too, of course. It makes sense when you're ramping up to Easter. Everybody's probably talking at churches now about the cross and Jesus and who he is. And so I picked up on where we left off a few weeks ago here at Living Stones. But I wanted to share something that was hysterical, if I can find it here real quick. We were talking about a principle a few weeks ago that I thought was very, very powerful. I don't think I want to find it right away.
You're talking about love is...
Yeah, so...
courage is based on love.
Yeah, we talked about the 5 people out of the thousands and thousands of people that Jesus impacted. 5 people are there when he needs them the most. 4 of them happen to be women. And I guess this is a good point to talk about this. The Bible does not forbid women from doing ministry. Obviously, it would not be a very strategic thing on the Lord's behalf to have a ministry team that you cut in half on the basis of someone's gender. We understand biblical authority. We understand order in the home, husbands being the leader of the home. We understand men being spiritual leaders in the church. But I just want to say loudly and clearly, that does not forbid our ladies from sharing the gospel, from teaching, from ministering, from praying for people. When I bring my wife with me on these types of trips, man, she enhances my ministry, and I want to encourage everybody who's listening, and let your wife be your partner in ministry, and encourage your wife to get in the game, and grow her and help her and pray for her and strengthen her. And I think we've seen that to be the case at Living Stones. And certainly in the biblical account, especially around the resurrection, women are prominent everywhere and the men are absent. There's only one man who's standing with Jesus at the very, very end. And, you talk about cost, identifying with Jesus at that point as he's nailed on that cross means you could end up on that cross. So this is a high-risk situation. And so what is it, we talked about, what is it that is driving them? Certainly these women have no power. They have no status. They have no strength in terms of muscles. They have no means of defense. And yet they're fearlessly gathered by the cross, but only one guy is there out of all the men Jesus impacted, and that is John the Beloved. And the fact that he calls himself that 5 times in his gospel is not a sign of arrogance. It's actually a sign of intimacy. And we try to drive this point home, and I think it's a powerful point. Until you understand the love of Jesus for you, you will never be secure in your identity, and you'll never be secure in terms of your standing before God. And consequently, you will not have boldness or confidence with the Lord, and you won't have courage to stand for truth, because all of that is really rooted in passion for Jesus. And I don't know about you, but I found that when my heart is aflame with love for the Lord, there's a holy boldness that I move in that causes me to speak to people, to proclaim the gospel without fear. But it's not rooted in the fact, Pastor Ron's just a courageous guy. No, it's rooted in our love for the Lord. When you love someone deeply, you don't count the cost. You just go for it. And I didn't get a chance to share this at all 3 services a couple weeks ago, but it's pretty hilarious. There was a true story. There was a woman from Florida out walking her dog. Now again, I'm just going to interject here. It's not 69 degrees here today, but you can walk your dog in Indiana and not have to worry about an alligator eating your dog. All right. I mean, I just want to say it's a little chilly right now, but I don't know. That's a pro for me. All right. I like the fact that my little Gracie is not going to end up with her head in the mouth of an alligator like this poor woman's dog was. So true story. She said, I didn't think, I just reacted. I jumped into the water. She lands on the back of this alligator. She starts prying the jaws open and pulls the dog out and rescues this dog while the alligator just, sails off into the pond or whatever. And it's a perfect picture of exactly what I'm talking about. That woman did not pause and go, wow, should I do this? Maybe she should have thought, after all, it's a dog. But no, her love for that animal caused her simply to react. And I think that was a lot of what was going on at the cross. No one here that's gathered close to Jesus at that point is going, wow, I wonder what will happen if I come up here, close to the Lord, if I identify with him, if I move out of the comfort zone into the danger zone. They're not asking those questions because love doesn't ask those questions. Love just does whatever it takes. And it was a strong, I guess, admonishment that what we need most in America, if we're looking for courage in the church, we need a fresh baptism of the love of Jesus. We need to fall in love with the Lord all over again. Once that happens, then there's a surge of boldness, especially among men, When a man gets impacted radically by Jesus, he becomes bold and aggressive in a good way, confident in sharing his faith and in standing up for truth. So that was my plea with them, and it kind of leads us into where we want to go today. We've been talking about a lot of things, but I read a heartwarming story that I think is an example of just what we're talking about. We saw in the news, I guess it was maybe 2 weeks ago, a week ago, that after the Olympics or whatever, that there was a wrestler from Iran who went back home, and he and his friends were accused of crimes actually against God. And crimes against the state, and they were given a sham trial, a kangaroo court. They were found guilty of these charges. They were tortured to get a confession of guilt, admission of guilt, and then suspended from a crane in the public. So this is a 19-year-old young man whose only crime was that he loves freedom and wants freedom, and again, that caused international outrage. That was only to be followed up by the second incident here, which this is what I wanted to spend a little time talking with you about. This is from Family Research Council. It says a women's soccer team disappears into Iran as threat of executions loom. Evidently, they were part of the Australia's Asian Cup tournament that was taking place. And after that, well, first of all, while this was going on, they were playing the Iranian national anthem, and these ladies stood there silently. They were not singing along. The Iranian government did not like that. Most of the world recognized that this was a subtle but strong, sign of defiance. And by the end of the day, they were singing because their government had gotten to them. So now they're faced with this terrible, terrible decision that no young lady would ever want to face. They could stay in Australia or in the United States. President Trump granted them asylum. Or they could go back to a life that is horrific for everybody, but especially for women. And knowing that because of their silent, act of defiance, they could face the wrath of that, wicked regime. And these girls were saying, you know what, in fact, 5 of them said, yes, we will defect, only to later change their minds because the thought in their minds is, what will this government do to my parents and to my family? And not only that, but as we talked about, think about, even if nothing happened to your parents, think about never being able to see your parents ever again. I mean, this was a horrific, dilemma that they're facing. And again, it kind of gets back to this principle. They all went back, or most of them went back. I think only 2 of the team defected, but they all went back to this horrific situation out of, I guess, a greater love. The greater love was certainly not for their nation or for their leaders. Well, they do love their nation. They hate this regime. But the real love was the love for freedom. And it touched my heart to see in real world young people having to face these kind of difficult dilemmas, and what's driving them is love. What do they love the most in this situation? It's a love of their parents, and a hope that's still in their hearts that this can change. But because they did not sing, they were labeled wartime traitors. Again, the Trump administration tried to help, as did other people. And he's one of the guys said here's coercion is being used, intimidation tactics. They asked him, what are the odds that these girls have a grim future back home? And this man who had to flee himself, a former Olympian from Iran, he says 99%, maybe 100%, they are not safe for sure when they go back. Maybe they'll be killed. Maybe they'll go to prison. I don't know. He said they're fighting the regime for one word, and that is freedom. These are the kind of things that are sobering to me because, again, I think our greatest enemy in the West or in America is the fact that we take freedom for granted. And so many countries have, they're fighting for the rights and the freedoms and the liberties, that we have. And they don't have any of that. And it kind of humbles me. It makes me want to make sure that I'm appreciating and using the freedom that I have. Here's a story of one gal who left. This was previously, years before. She said, I lost everything, my family, my safety, my home, even my dog. She said a national soccer player, here's her crime. She was caught playing soccer with some male friends in Switzerland without her hijab. Both acts considered criminal. It wasn't long before she was receiving text messages like, we'll cut your head off and send a picture of it to your family. Knowing she faced torture, prison, or worse, she never went home again. She says she lost all the money she'd been saving in Iranian accounts. She said, you're in a new country with new people, a new culture, a new language, and you have to start from zero. But again, out of a love for freedom, these people are willing, to do that. So I guess if you ask me, and there's a lot of opinions going on, and I want to hear yours, about the Iranian war, I think that what President Trump is doing, his leadership, is actually something that our children and our grandchildren someday will fully appreciate. That this is huge. I believe it's changing the whole shape of the Middle East. And I believe, people are saying we shouldn't be starting wars. I believe Trump is ending a war, very soon ending a war that has been going on for almost 50 years. And when you look at the military buildup that they've had in that country, I had no idea how well armed they were. Obviously, in certain areas, their intelligence and intel, all that kind of stuff, is not where the U.S. is. But we just saw these ICBMs, long-range missiles, that President Trump was saying that they had. Sure enough, as soon as they get a chance to respond to us attacking them or taking out some of their military stuff, they just start indiscriminately launching missiles into civilian populations. And some of these, as Trump pointed out, are able to reach places like Paris, Berlin, London, and all of a sudden NATO, that was acting like a bunch of, leftists, all of a sudden they're waking up like, oh, wow, Trump was right. These people can put bombs, serious bombs, in our major cities. And so I think there's a massive shift taking place among our allies, certainly with Israel and in the Middle East, that in the long run is going to be incredibly beneficial for freedom-loving people like Americans and hopefully the rest of the West, Your take on some of this stuff?
I mean, I think situations like this, the stories you told, remind us how the everyday freedoms we have, we're able to go online and make a social media comment just ripping the president, ripping Congress, ripping whoever, and not have to face jail or torture. These are the freedoms that we mostly have taken for granted, that we don't realize there's expensive cost for that. So I think that's a sober reminder of how do we get that freedom. Like the Iranians are not dumb people. Iranians, the Persians are, historically, they're some of the most brilliant people in the world. It's not an intelligence issue. What is it that has caused such a rigid, terrible regime, and what has caused freedom? These are the questions we have to answer, and how do we preserve it? I think that freedom question is a major issue that I think every American should consider. Because if you don't know what causes that freedom, what retains that freedom, and what causes tyranny, what truly causes it, I know we use the word all the time, tyranny, dictator, or whatever, but what truly causes that versus what's happening today, what United States versus Iran, we won't really know how we can prevent that in our nation today.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. This, I think, highlights, I guess, the intimidation and the cowardice that happens in Western countries, especially when we lose sight of God, we lose sight of our history, we lose sight of our collective culture. This quote I thought was powerful. Heroes die once. That's what this guy shared with his Iranian sisters. Heroes die once, but cowards die every day. You are courageous. You stood up for your future, for what your heart truly wants. And soon, he promised, we will all celebrate victory together in Iran. I mean, I love that. Heroes die once, cowards die every day. I think what he's saying there is, cowards are forced to make cowardly choices instead of standing up for what's right, instead of standing up for freedom, instead of making hard choices. Cowards make those wrong choices every day, and thus they die 1,000 deaths because they're cowards. They're making cowardly choices. Heroes die once because they stand for truth, they stand for freedom. And I think in America we've become a nation largely, at least you see on the left, of cowards. Where's the women that are standing up? Where's the feminist movements in the West that are standing up for these Iranian women who face all kinds of horrific treatment over there. Where's their voices? Where's the media's voice? We just had 30,000 people slaughtered. Where's the outrage for that? There's none, because it's easy to sit in your ivory towers where you're safe, or march on the streets where you're really out of the danger zone because nothing's going to happen to you. Those are little cowardly acts that people do that say, I'm somebody, I'm making a difference, when you're not standing up for truth and you're not standing up for people who are experiencing this kind of horrific treatment. I wanted to read a couple things we talked about in the past. This is a guy named, I'm probably butchering his name. You and I were talking about this. G-A-D, I guess it's God, S-A-A-D, like God's sod. Forgive me, my friend, if I messed up your name. He's a professor in Britain, and he shares this kind of tongue-in-cheek. He says, now that we have had many Islamic terror attacks on U.S. soil in the past few days alone, my heart aches at the possibility that Islamophobia might increase. If you are about to be killed in an Islamic attack, please stop a moment and recognize that while you might be dead soon, there are many peaceful Muslims. I think that right there kind of describes our leftist voices in America right there. There's no concern for genuine victims. There's no concern for people, they can't walk, Americans that can't walk the streets at night. We just saw that 18-year-old girl at Loyola University murdered by an illegal here who, again, had a history of crime, leftist judges letting them out on the street. She's out for a walk with her friends and she's murdered. Nobody's shouting for these people or for the average American that we should have the right to live our lives without fear of these things happening. He says here, too, I thought this was interesting. There are two battlefields, the kinetic war against the West, which Islam cannot win. In other words, the war of power, might against might, they're not going to beat us. Military. And the non-kinetic war against the West, which Islam is winning. Islamic leaders, activists, politicians, and thinkers explained long ago that Islam will defeat the West in three ways. The womb of their women. They're going to have more babies than we are, and they're already doing that. Migration, which the West is keen on helping via their orgiastic open borders policies. So again, we're just going to invade. And this one, by using the West's miserable freedoms against us. In other words, and we're going to talk about this a little bit, they take our God-given liberties and pervert them and use those same liberties to actually undermine our nation. He said they have screamed this repeatedly, but we refuse to listen because of parasitic, suicidal empathy. And I want to highlight a couple other things that are just common sense here that I thought was really good, and then I want you to weigh in. He says the West must very soon recognize that, number one, all immigrants are not equally likely to assimilate. Pretty obvious. All immigrants are not equally likely to be a net benefit to the host society. We have to just look at the Somali fraud situation, for instance, and how many of them are on the public dole. All immigrants are not equally likely to be a net existential danger to the host society. All cultures are not equal. All religions are not equal. A religion that seeks to destroy your society, civilization, religious heritage, and freedoms should not receive protection under the First Amendment. And I want to talk about that in just a second. He said you don't owe it to said religion to capitulate in the name of tolerance, compassion, and suicidal empathy. Our freedoms and liberties are being used to erase our existence. And he finally writes, it's time to wake up. Every day that passes without the necessary autocorrections is ensuring that our children and their children will live in a world that is astoundingly darker than anything that the West has ever known. Let me say it this way. A religion that seeks to destroy your society, civilization, religious heritage, and freedoms should not receive protection under the First Amendment. That's where they're saying that our very freedoms are being used to undermine our country. Because as soon as I was trying to find one more they had, might not have might not have it here. He also said that as soon as you use the word religion, you call it a religion instead of an ideology, then it falls under the First Amendment, and we have to treat all religions, at least as the current misinterpretation suggests, we have to treat all religions the same. So if you have a religion that's here that literally, his point was, literally wants to kill everyone that's not subscribing to their ideology, and then you have another religion that says, we're not allowed to hurt anyone. We're actually called to love our neighbors. And you allow those two religions to live in the same culture, and you have a misunderstanding of the First Amendment, you're going to suggest that both of those need to have freedom to fully practice their beliefs, when one religion's belief is to actually destroy you and to destroy everything that you hold dear. That is suicidal empathy, and I agree with them. That is absolutely going to destroy our country if we don't wake up. But this is exactly where we're at. So your thoughts on that? Because, we're fighting against a First Amendment that's been turned upside down. And I think I just saw Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, come right out and say we're operating under a false understanding of religious liberty and freedom of speech in this country. So I think there's an awakening. And as we talked in our last podcast, there's a number of congressmen who are actually starting to say some pretty bold things that, under the Biden administration, nobody would say,
And I saw in Europe, there's kind of a rumble of the anti-immigration parties arising. In Germany, I think it's the AfD. In England, possibly. Some of these, because they see what happened to rampant
and of all places, France. I saw
France too,
I saw France broken down into whatever their provinces or whatever they call them over there, and how many of them voted conservative, and it's amazing the turnaround. I think once people get a taste of this insanity, they realize, hey, maybe that conservative stuff and maybe our religious roots and maybe our Christianity is not so bad after all. I'm hoping, I think the media, I don't know what your take is on this, but I think the media amplifies the voice on the left that to make it look larger than it is. I saw an interesting stat that said among Trump's supporters, their support of him has wavered 0. And I know that's where I'm at. I support what he's doing 100%. Believe in what he's doing. Believe he loves our nation. Don't like how he says it all the time. But when it comes to policy, I'm as enthusiastic about what he's doing as I ever was. And I think people like me that share with my values are the same way. So I think the left amplifies how big their voice is because they got all the media and higher ed and everything else. But I think there is a groundswell where people have just had enough. And I think we're seeing that, as you said, all across Europe. And I hope so, because right now, I don't feel like, did you see what the guy Starmer, I think his name's Starmer, and
English,
yeah, where he basically said if Trump doesn't do, I forget what the thing was, that you're not allowed to have any bases, any military bases in UK. And I'm like, who is this guy? These are not people that have our values. And I think J.D. Vance and others, when they went over there, really called them out. Marco Rubio really challenged them that, we can't even partner with you if you don't support the First Amendment and some of these other things that we've shared in common. So I'm hoping this is a massive wake-up call. And Trump's saying, look, these guys have missiles that they can put in your major cities. Maybe you should start, paying your fair share at NATO, Maybe you should be a little nicer to the United States and stop cozying up to people that hate you in the name of, tolerance and political correctness. I just hope it's a major wake-up call, because I think in the West, again, we're so blinded by our ideology, we think we can all just kumbaya and live together. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of fallen human nature. It's a utopian viewpoint that is not real and never will be real until Christ comes and brings his kingdom. And all of this humanistic nonsense actually endangers you, because you think you can just run and give these people a combined group hug and we're all going to live happily ever after. That's not going to happen. Talk a little bit. I want to flesh this out.
I think his 3 points. We talk about the third one, which is kind of using our own liberty against us.
Yep.
I feel like that one it's harder to articulate because the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, those are kind of pillars of, at least in the United States. But the other two are things that we can very, very practically address. Well, let me say it this way. The other two to me are difficult issues that we don't want to address. The first one is reproduction. I mean, this is like the elephant in the room. Like our America's obsession with convenience, with our own pleasure, with ourselves. And again, like I sound very judgmental here, and everyone's got their own issues and problems. But I think just by and large, my personal opinion, by and large, our inability or our lack of willingness to say, you know what, we got to have kids. We got to take care of them. We got to train them well.
Even to back up, not just we have to have kids, but how about we value children? We value family. We value marriage. I mean, it's those values that undergird all of that.
That's the heart. Like, again, we can go all day and protest and we can vote right people, but the real hard work that is done to change our culture is demonstrated through caring about marriage, having healthy marriage, dying to yourself and loving your spouse, both for husband and for wives, raising kids. And I don't know how much things I see on social media that is just saying, having kids and my life is great and blah, blah, blah. And like, again, I know not everyone's called to have kids, but by and large, that is part of the commandment that's been given to us, is to multiply, is to care for our kids.
It's the fundamental reason God brings us together again. Yes, obviously the sexual intimacy, thank God he made it pleasurable, but the pleasure is not the primary reason God allowed a man and woman to come together in marriage. It's so that they could have offspring, they could have children. That's what happens.
It's how we build civilizations. So if by and large a nation group wants to commit suicide, they just have less kids than two. Yeah, I mean, 2 is just 2.1 is replacement rate. So when you have a religious group, a religious sect, a ideological group who says, you know what, we're going to do the hard work and going to have average 6 to 8 kids after a generation, and they're going to have 6 to 8 kids in generations, and they're going to do the hard work,
right?
Indoctrinating them, teaching them, they will win. So that is, like, to me, the first step is saying, how do we once again help people understand our lives are not just about how I can get the greatest material satisfaction out of my life, but that it's the greatest joy actually is in propagating our culture and values to the next generation and building civilization and make our world a better place through reproduction, and not be like, well, I'm scared of the carbon units they consume and whatever else it is, but to say, hey, you know what, we want to leave our mark through our children. I think that's one huge piece that we don't talk about. Interesting.
And as you just highlighted, it's a huge biblical worldview piece. Yeah. I mean, this is how we apply biblical truth to bring about healthy cultures, and then we get back to, where did these rights and liberties come from? They didn't come from any government; they came from God. And so, some of these things that I would say this: religious liberty extends under our Constitution. Fundamentally, the overarching religious liberty is Christian in nature. And so anything that goes against those Christian values, like polygamy or beating up your wife or men marrying 6-year-old girls or 9-year-old girls like Muhammad did, this stuff is wicked and perverse, and is not, Sharia law, shutting down streets so the Muslims can come out and have their prayer in our streets 3 times a day. This is not protected under the First Amendment, because the First Amendment was created by Christians, and the Christian worldview is the overarching understanding of that principle. We allow you to be here, but there's a point to where we go, no. What you're doing is inconsistent with a Christian understanding of liberty, which is what our nation was founded on. So, just to whitewash it all and say, yeah, you're welcome here, you can do whatever you want, we have to treat you all equally, is nonsense. We ran into this when we were trying to have a Christian event, rent a public school, have a Christian event, and the school attorney said to me, if we let you in, then we have to let Satan worshipers in. Now, that is a perverted understanding of the First Amendment. The First Amendment does not protect Satan worshipers. That was not in the heart of our founding fathers to protect Satan worshipers. Trust me. Mm-hmm. So it just shows you how weird and perverted our thinking has become as it relates to kind of creating this level playing field, which, as many are starting to understand now, is actually going to lead to our suicide as a nation, because Islam will take advantage of that all over the place, and as will any other hostile religion.
Or any of the religions taking advantage of it. Well, the second issue is the unfettered immigration.
Yep.
Which to me is about power grab. It's about power grab. It's about getting voters. It's about getting a demographic to come in. So it's our obsession with power.
And let me just say this. My take is the SAVE Act is truly exposing the power grab for what it is on the left. Anybody that's against election integrity and providing a simple form of ID when we have to do that in 1,000 other ways. I mean, I had to fly. I had to show my ID like multiple times. This is not hard, and no one is being disenfranchised. I think it's very clear what's really at stake here. And I think it's obvious that the only reason you would be against the SAVE Act is you're the one trying to buy votes and allow illegals to come in and people who aren't even citizens to vote. I think that's very clear. So I think we can win on the immigration issue. We got work to do on the first issue, but talk about the last issue.
Yeah, I mean, the last issue is kind of what you just talking about. What is the First Amendment really based on? I think because of our lack of understanding of you can't have rights unless you have a creator. I think there's a disconnect right there. You can't even make a moral statement without a creator.
Yep.
And because that line's been severed, ideologically, it's been severed in schools, it's been severed in universities, it's been severed in government, and it's been severed in some churches. The churches don't even teach that. Some churches don't even teach that.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's been severed, we have a hard time, the moral authority of what you just said, to say, you know what? Because of First Amendment, we got to let everyone go. We got to let everyone do it. Because that ultimate logical line that the Bill of Rights itself.
It's religious pluralism.
Absolutely. Then I would say religious pluralism is probably the transcendent religion in America today.
Because religious pluralism, somebody's got to be calling the shots. Yep. And someone's got to be making the decisions. When two opposing views come together, someone's got to figure out how to solve that problem. And then government becomes God. Instead of thus saith the Lord, instead of a clear Christian teaching or the Ten Commandments or whatever it is we want to go back to, all those things are put on the same plane. And so again, we highlighted some of the horrific beliefs of Islam as it relates to sexual perversion and abuse and honor killing and all these kind of things. To think that somehow under the Constitution we would have to allow them to practice that while they're in our country is suicide. It's national suicide. So we got to get this figured out. And I think for many years Christians have kind of been quiet. We want to love everybody. We don't want to come across as whatever. And in doing so, that's the short game. We're losing our country. We got to start speaking boldly about these issues. Again, we have to recover the basis of this biblical truth, and then we have to declare it, and unashamedly. It used to be we'd be a little quiet or a little soft or whatever. It's like no. Those times are gone. I mean, we literally are fighting for the soul of our nation.
I think for Christians to find their voice, to be able to speak on this, we have to first connect that transcendent, that we're not in a pluralistic religion or nation. We are in a one nation under the Judeo-Christian Yahweh, Jesus Christ. That connection point needs to happen for believers, starting maybe in the church institution of the church, that people actually talk about that, because that's not talked about often enough.
Yeah, well, that is a challenge for me as a pastor to know when and where and how you fit that in, right, to the right audience. I wish we had another couple more days in the week that we could fit some of this in, but nevertheless, I think.
But I mean, institution, in the family. How about just in the families? How about in the parents educating their kids on what's the origin of the Bill of Rights? Yeah. Well, how do you even have rights? Where do the rights come from? Yeah. I mean, just even that connection allows Christians to have the rhetorical backbone to be able to say, you know what, First Amendment, the Bill of Rights is not just anything. Anyone can say anything. There's limitations, and these limitations are heeded by the Bible.
Then maybe this is a good time to wrap this podcast up and to make a plug for the book that you're writing. Andrew's going to be coming out with a curriculum called How to Train Your Children to Be World Changers.
Yeah, just watch this podcast.
He's working on that. When are you going to have that done by? No, I'm kidding you. No, but you're exactly right. I mean, this has to start in the home, has to start in the local church, and that means we got to get to work.
Yeah.
I mean, not like we're not working. We're working, folks. We really are. But there's a lot of work to do.
I'm just thinking about the mental barriers to most Christians be able to boldly speak on that is because they've been educated in a pluralistic society, in education, in their family, in their church, probably.
Right. No, and you're right. And I think, I guess my heart is on this podcast that we're able to actually get into some of these issues. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. I want to direct you back to our website, elstones.org. We have a media page there. That's where you can hear some of the messages that are being preached from the pulpit. And then obviously we don't get to fit everything into what we're preaching on Sunday morning. And so it spills over and we get to talk about these things in a lot more detail, here on the podcast. So I encourage you to watch both and to tell your friends about both. And again, if you're in Mississippi, make sure you get your car repaired right here at my man John Rankin's place. All right. Until we meet again. Yeah, you got to find.
I got to find a point. I just thought about this. It's interesting because Islam is not pluralistic at all.
No.
They use pluralism, but they're really not pluralistic. The LGBT lifestyle is not pluralistic.
Nope.
Almost every single worldview that's been pushed down our throats are not pluralistic.
Yep.
So
I've got friends in India that are dealing with radical Hindu governments that are not pluralistic. Friends in Pakistan, they're dealing with Islamic oppression, not pluralistic. Yeah.
So pluralism is really just a cover.
Well, I would say this, pluralism in terms of tolerance. Mm-hmm. Not putting everybody on equal plane, is a Christian value.
Sure, yes.
I mean, it's why we have Hindu temples, we have Muslim mosques, and all these different, expressions in our country. It's because of our Christian worldview. You will not find that anywhere in the world, to your point. So this is Christianity that's allowing people to practice within boundaries. If that's why I love the one lady from somewhere in South America, I think, when one of the imams said, cause, riots, take your violence to the streets, no. She deported him instantly. She's like, you're not staying in our country under some banner of freedom that we allow, and then undermine the freedom that we have and incite people to attack our people. Get out of here. That's exactly what should be happening. We should be stopping all of this nonsense and deporting these people in a second. And again, I hope all that gets straightened out as soon as possible so we can continue the process of getting folks here out of our country that shouldn't be here. But that's another issue. I do like the fact, though, that President Trump's talking about putting ICE agents in our airports since the TSA folks are not getting funded and adding help. He's always one step ahead, and I like that about him. Anyway, that's for another podcast. Yeah. So glad you guys tuned in. We look forward to seeing you next week.